If you are interested in drawing, then these are some things I believe that everyone should know. So number one is that there are two parts to drawing. Number one is the theoretical part, and the number two is the practical part. And these things should be in balance. Let's say you're a drawing professor with a PhD in theoretical drawing. You know everything there is to know about all the fundamentals of art, all the art history, all the best practices and research studies, and you're the leading world expert in art theory. But you've never picked up a pencil or a crayon and drawn in your life. Are you good at drawing? I don't think so. You've never drawn before. And there's the other side. Maybe you live in a cave and you're drawing with the charcoal on all the walls. Are you good at drawing? Probably yes. So that says that practice is more important than theory, but we don't live in a cave. We live in a society. And people have been practicing drawing for thousands of years and really understanding how drawing works ever since the ancient Greeks. So it can be very beneficial for you to study and learn what the people through many generations have learned and passed down. And with internet, it's easier than ever. So as I said, I think there should be a balance between theory and practice. And if I have to give advice, I would say that just focus on the next thing you need to learn. If you know a little bit of theory, you can see 1 or 2 steps ahead of you. You can look at your own drawings critically and see that, oh, maybe my anatomy is lacking, or maybe I'm really struggling with perspective. And that means that's the next thing that you need to study a bit more, practice, do some exercises. And art is a creative field. You don't have to follow any book or guide. You can come up with your own ways how to practice those concepts. Especially, it's good if you're having fun in the process. So I'll give you a little example. Let's say you want to improve drawing portraits. You can do the easiest thing ever, which is go on YouTube, watch a tutorial, and go on Pinterest and just do photo studies. Maybe that's not as fun as some other ways that you can go about it. But you can be more creative. Maybe go out and draw strangers in a bus, or try to draw your family, or try to draw your self-portrait in a mirror. That way the results can be not just technical, but also artistic. And they have a real human connection behind it, which is very important. And let's say you're drawing your self-portrait, you might understand more. And the more ideas you have that are unique, that are not what everyone else is doing, the more you'll stand out as an artist. Why? Because you will understand some things from a different perspective, and your art will reflect that. So number 2 is a quote I've heard many times from many drawing professors, is that drawing is thinking. And how I interpret that is that drawing is not just about the result. Your drawing reflects your thinking. It reflects how you see the world. It reflects what you understand about art making. It reflects your experiences and your motivations and values. That's why if you have 10 people drawing the same thing, there will be 10 different results, because we each have our own experiences, we each have our own skill level we're at, and we each have our unique point of view, how we see things. And that's where I think art gets really interesting, is that there is so much freedom in the different ways you can think about things and different ways you can see the world. And your skill level is how accurately and how clearly you can communicate that thinking and that worldview into an artwork. Number 3 is related to skill and time. When you're starting out as a beginner, it takes very little amount of time to grow and to see improvement. But as you get more advanced, it takes proportionally more time in general for you to get to the next level. Let's just say I'm starting out and I put in 20 hours of practice into drawing, and I go from not being able to draw almost anything to being able to draw something like a face or a car or whatever you set out you wanted to learn how to draw. And in 20 hours, the result can be pretty good. But let's say you've been drawing for 20 years and you've been drawing for more than 10,000 hours in total. You put in another 20 hours and you barely see any progress at all, because proportionally that's a very small amount over your whole drawing career, and that's not going to make as much of a difference. And about different skill levels, there is the beginner, the amateur, the professional, and the master. If I had to place myself somewhere on this spectrum, I would say I'm between an amateur and a professional, depending on the field. Because I like to paint, illustrate, animate, do printmaking. I'm always experimenting with different mediums, but in each of those different disciplines, I learn something new and I can apply that in another discipline, and my artist level as a whole grows. And the only compass you should use when trying to decide which way to go as an artist is your own intuition, because truly the playing field is so free. You can do whatever you want, and you can go where no one has ever been. And that's truly the meaning of being an artist. You go your own path, you discover new things, and you share them with the world. So the fourth thing I want to talk about is the fundamentals of art. We all know the fundamentals, they are so important. Pretty much in any skill, there are fundamental skills that you can focus on, you can learn, you can improve, and your whole practice will benefit from that. And in drawing, it's composition, its values, its perspective, its proportions, anatomy, lighting, design, color, gesture, materiality, and maybe some more. So depending on which field you want to work on as an artist, you have these different fundamental combinations that you should focus on. Let's say you're a painter. Of course, color, values, form, light is going to be important for you. Composition, of course. But if you're a character animator, gesture, anatomy, form, design is going to be more important for you. Not to even talk about the ideas you have or the story you're telling. Those are super important as well. So my advice to you is to figure out what kind of an artist are you, which of these fundamentals are the most important for you, and to really focus on them and see which ones you're strongest at, which ones you need to improve, and according to that you can work on your skills with a plan. So the fifth thing I want to talk about is drawing from nature and drawing from your imagination. And I think that drawing from nature, especially if you're doing like a study, let's say a simple still life study, it's more objective. You can see what's in front of you, you can see what you've drawn, and you can compare those two things and see how they relate. And to do that, you go back to the fundamentals. You analyze each fundamental one by one. For example, you can ask yourself, is the composition okay? Are the proportions right? Are the colors right? And that way you can compare your drawing to real life and sort of check these boxes. So drawing from nature is super important when you're learning about art, because also you're building your visual library, you're learning how things look like in real life, and you can apply those skills when drawing from your imagination. That's why pretty much in any art school you apply to, there needs to be some studies from nature so that professors can see your level at this skill. So the other type of drawing is drawing from your imagination. And this is where we have to talk about visualization. There's a spectrum of how much can you see inside your head, going from completely nothing, everything is black, everything is empty, and you cannot visualize anything, and that's called aphantasia. And the top level is hyper-realistic, vivid visualization, where you can visualize things that are just as real or even more real than reality, how you see things with your open eyes. You can imagine in so much detail. On a personal note, I'm very close to aphantasia. I see almost nothing in my head, yet I draw from imagination all the time. How do I do it? I have trained my arm to project my imagination ideas into paper, and I can combine the movements and the forms I've learned from studying from nature and sort of imagine on paper, if that makes sense. But I know many artists, they imagine in their head and then they struggle to draw what they've imagined. And that can be complicated if you have very good visualization skills, that you're gonna need to spend some time to be able to get your drawing skills up to that level so that you can communicate what you see in your head. But there's also a sort of a middle path. You can combine drawing from nature with the drawing from imagination. For example, you have an idea in your head and you want it to be more realistic, more believable, so you find and you make references in real life and you draw from real life and you combine these elements to represent what you saw in your head. Or you can be sitting outside drawing a landscape and you can imagine like what kind of a character walks through this landscape and draw that character in. Or maybe what if the colors were different? You change your colors and you play around combining reality with your imagination. The sixth thing I want to talk about is that drawing is not photography, meaning that you don't need to draw every single detail. You don't need to represent everything that you see, because in reality, it's actually very, very complex what we see. We see so many elements, so many colors, so many lights, and to capture all of that in a drawing is a very difficult and, in my opinion, unnecessary task, because you have to start from somewhere, and where you start, it's from what's most important. You have to simplify what you see into the big shapes, into the big color arrangements, into light and shadow values, and represent what's most important in the scene. So one principle you can always use is start by drawing in the most important big shapes, like the silhouette of a character, and then you divide it into smaller details, and then once those are good, then you do the final small details, and that add the most character and that make the scene more interesting. So the more detail you have, the more the viewer has to decode the drawing. And except, for example, in illustration, if you add lots of detail in the right places, the viewer will spend a lot of time looking at it because they will analyze all the detail. But if you have a sort of a minimalistic drawing, then it can be very easily comprehended and understood. And maybe if the viewer doesn't feel anything, they will spend very little time looking at it. So number 7 is the most important thing, and I've touched on it before, is that in art you are truly free to do whatever you want. You can create your own path. You don't have to listen to anybody who says you should do this, you should do that, but you have to be authentic. You have to listen to your inner voice. And I would say you have to be very patient, because it's an endless activity. There is no ceiling that you can reach and you cannot go any further. There's always more paths to explore, more different aspects of drawing you can try and grow as an artist. In the meantime, alongside with art, you grow as a human, you grow as a personality, you have all these experiences and wisdom, and I'd advise you to share your art. And the more art is there in the world, in any skill level, the more other people will want to do it, because it's truly a good thing.